But you are wrong, Professor, and so on, and so on, and so on. But you are the one who's wrong here, roughly speaking. Hey guys, what's up? I hope I'm not offending anybody here. It's the Culture Detective here, investigating your favorite TV shows, and today I'm gonna be doing a TV show review on House of Cards, Season 2. So, yeah, I know not many people watch House of Cards now because the show had ended, and recently, actually, it's already been 2 years. Kevin Spacey, who plays the main character of the show, had some pretty serious sexual assault allegations. But because the 2020 election is coming, and, right now, I don't know why, but lately, I've been wanting to watch a TV show that's more political, so let's separate the art from the artist. So because I know very little about politics in the USA, so if I am wrong about anything, feel free to comment it down below, tell me I'm wrong, and yeah. Anyway, the show's first season sees evil, manipulative Congressman Frank Underwood slowly climbing his way to become the Vice President of the USA, with the help of his wife Claire, Chief Staff Doug Stamper, and secret reporter Zoe Barnes. And to become the Vice President, he used devious ways to get rid of potential VP candidates, and to use other people like Peter Russo to boost himself up, and in the process, well, spoiler alert, hurting him. Peter's girlfriend, Christina, then worked for the president, and his other affair, Rachel, is being held onto by Doug. Also, Zoe ended her relationship with Frank and started to work against Frank by digging dirt out of his, So, yeah, with the help of Lucas and Janine. So, that's basically season 1. Now enter season 2. Episode 1 is chapter 14, and it's a very bold and ambitious beginning for the season, almost bombastic. Already a major character death is thrown in. We also have Frank Underwood and billionaire businessman Raymond Tusk pulling strings under President Garrett Walker, who's obviously less smart or powerful or significant. Also, Frank wanted to choose a whip for the party, who's apparently a campaign manager or something, and he had to somehow get rid of all the other potential whips in order to get that one person that he wants, and that person is Jackie Sharp. And to see Frank Underwood become VP is both scary and satisfying at the same time. I don't root for Frank, but at the same time I kinda do. So yes, it's a very bold and jaw-dropping opening for the season, and I love the way the episode ends when Frank finally spoke to the camera, breaking the fourth wall, saying, "Oh, you think I forgot about ya, did ya?" Or something like that, and there's a lot of fourth wall breaking. There are more fourth wall breaking in season 1 than in season 2, but still, these moments are gold. There are a lot of quotes in the season as well. Chapter 15 is less shocking, but still a very tense and smart episode. It's also kind of getting complicated as well. Frank triggered some Chinese people by making the president fight against the Chinese hackers by imposing some laws. And by doing that, he's trying to hurt Raymond Tusk in some way. And it's a little confusing, but I kind of got the whole thing of it at some point later on. But anyway, on the other hand, Lucas was trying to expose Frank Underwood, and I actually root for him a lot. And then we have chapter 16, which I think is a pretty awesome episode, not gonna lie, it's pretty good. So in order to prevent a government shutdown, Frank has to successfully make a bill pass to, I guess, push the retirement age, and by doing that, he had to negotiate with the Republicans. But Raymond Tusk was secretly against that, so now Frank Underwood secretly has a rivalry. And we also learn more about Lucas's situation when he looked for a hacker in the dark web to hack Frank Underwood. And surprisingly, the hacker is played by Jimmy Simpson. Yes, it's him again. It's him from Westworld. Anyway, that scene in the Congress room when the Republicans who wanted to escape the room were escorted back in handcuffs, that scene was epic. Frank was purely evil, and he bodied them good. And I was hooked in the show once again. Chapter 17 is another high point for the season, in my opinion, and it's easily one of the most tense and brilliantly written moments so far. And it's one of the few moments in the show where I actually root for Frank and Claire. So Frank and his party had to somehow gather all these votes so that his one bill could pass. And to do that, Frank had to persuade Donald Blythe to help vote, whom he wrecked early on in season 1. And when both of them are having the talk, all of a sudden, because of a troll letter, the Capitol was locked down in quarantine, and that left Claire with no one when she was being interviewed live on national television. And then she got hit by all these tricky and passive-aggressive questions, especially the one where she was asked why she decided to not have children, which slowly led to the topic of abortion, which hurts her career. So she managed to steer the topic off and point the blame at the general that Claire and Frank encountered earlier in the season, the rapist guy who got pinned a golden star or something. And that's a really, really smart move. Chapter 18, Frank goes to the reenactment of a part of Civil War, and he met an actor who played his grandfather or something. On the same episode, he's beefing with a very rich and powerful Chinese billionaire businessman and indirectly beefing with Tusk. And that Chinese billionaire businessman is Xander Feng. And yeah, things got out of control and there were intense bits here and there, and Lucas was still trying his best to expose Frank, but it didn't end well for him, and I just feel so bad for Lucas. I root for him the most in the season, to be honest. So, yeah. Chapter 19 is where things tense up. Also a lot of irritating moments where some characters make dumb decisions, but also very normal decisions, I guess. Lucas, Janine, and Thomas all fell for Frank's trap in order for Frank to cover his own shit up. And damn, if I were Lucas, I would have published the article exposing Frank, even if everyone thinks I'm crazy. And that's because I would rather hurt my own reputation than to give my opponent what he or she wants. But maybe that's just me. Also, come on, why did Janine fall for that? Why? If I were Thomas, who's a friend of Janine's, I would pretend as if I'm not gonna help Lucas publish and make Frank think that he's on the upper hand. And if I were Lucas earlier, I probably wouldn't go for the hacker route either. But yeah, anyway, they're in a really rough situation and I feel so bad for them. And fuck, Christina's gonna be Claire's next victim. Claire's beginning to try to make the First Lady suspect Christina for sleeping with his husband, aka the President. And Claire was literally forcing Christina to do things she doesn't want to do in order to build the First Lady's suspicion. Again, if I were Christina, I would pretend in front of Claire and go my own way anyway. But yeah, that's sad. Rachel also met a woman and has a nice job at a church, but nope, Doug had to stop her. And then aside from that, Raymond and Frank are still beefing. So there you go, that's chapter 19. And then chapter 20 is where things tense up, and oh my gosh, I've never expected a TV show about politics to be so fucking thrilling and exciting, but here we are. Chapter 20 starts off creatively with an ad made by the Republicans mocking Frank Underwood, Jackie Sharp, Bob Burge, and others in the White House. So obviously someone's funding the Republicans. And of course, it's Raymond Tusk with the help of millionaire Native American Daniel Lanigan, and billionaire Chinese businessman Feng. So Frank decided to go to Dan and try to convince him to back off. And I was actually surprised at how aggressive Dan was. No explosions, no fights, no chases, but yet the episode is just so intense and exciting, and it keeps its audience on the edges of their seat, and I love it. Also exciting would be Doug actually going to Beijing and negotiate with Feng. And Feng had a deal, give him the bridge and he'll stop funding the Republicans. Also, I'm kind of glad that Claire and Frank are beginning to shift the blame away from Christina. It's like they knew that they have caused enough suffering for her, but still, at the end of the season, Christina still hasn't, deserved what she really deserves. So that's kind of sad. But damn, chapter 21 is even more thrilling and intense. Frank really wanted to build that bridge and Linda opposed it all the time. At the end, Frank and Linda had a row and Linda resigned as the chief of staff of the White House. I don't know if I got anything wrong or not, so please tell me if I got anything wrong. Also, Frank tried to convince Dan again, but then in the meeting, Raymond was there and there were some intense back and forth verbal firings. It's really intense. Seth now worked for Frank and not Remy, who's secretly helping Raymond, and oh boy, no one can be trusted in the show. Literally no one. And the ending of the episode is just so alarming. Raymond has some dirt on Frank and Claire and shit happened. Over to chapter 22, which is one of the most intense House of Cards episode I've watched. And it's such a painful episode to watch because we see a lot of lives being destroyed because of the whole Underwood versus Tusk battle, and two storylines happen at the same time during the episode, killing off two supporting characters, metaphorically, not literally, because in House of Cards, if your reputation is ruined or you've completely lost power, you're dead. So I'm giving a spoiler alert. I have to. So Raymond, Tusk, and Remy Danton worked together and managed to find out photos of Claire taken by Adam Galloway, which would ruin Adam's, Claire's, and Frank's reputation. And then for Plan B, they also found dirt on Freddy, the ribs guy, if you remember him. So in order to protect themselves, Claire told Adam to deny taking photos of her, and then not long after, Frank and Claire told the press that Adam indeed took those photos, and then Tusk found another photo where Claire showed even more skin. Frank's pawn Seth managed to fake the whole thing by pretending that Adam was taking another person's photo, but then later Tusk wanted to file charges on Adam's fiance's dad. So Frank and Claire forced Adam to pretend to admit that he indeed took those photos for publicity, and that's brutal. And if I were Adam, I would probably ask for an alternative solution where it's a win-win for both me, Adam Galloway, and the Underwoods. So such a sad way for Adam to end off. And then we have Freddy's situation, which sucks even more because Freddy is one of my favorite characters on the show. And because of the charges, reporters surrounded Freddy, and Freddy's son were there, and he threatened one of the reporters with a gun. And so Freddy had to pay to get his son out. Thus, he sold his joint, his ribs joint, and that's absolutely depressing and brutal. Then it's chapter 23, which is a bit of a cool down point. Frank used a reporter to expose some of the dark secrets about Raymond Tusk. Meanwhile, Claire wanted an anti-sexual assault bill to pass, but Jackie Sharp was against it because she wanted to maintain her reputation after the whole Adam Galloway thing. Doug was also in a bad situation as he is caught between working for Frank and being with Rachel, and then there's a scene where Edward Meacham catches Frank watching porn, and that's actually kind of funny. Overall, it's an okay episode, though it's actually kind of crazy that Jodie Foster directed this episode. Yeah, that Jodie Foster. Chapter 24, things tense up again. Frank is being questioned. He and Claire are losing the people's faith. Also, Remy begins to realize that fighting against Frank might not be a great idea at all. But damn, the ending is so dark. Claire made Edward drunk, and then Frank came back and they started kissing each other. And it's a threesome, and it's so fucked up, especially given that Claire was trying to pass an anti-sexual assault bill not too long ago. So that actually kinda hinted that Claire's intention wasn't really to pass the anti-sexual assault bill and to, I guess, protect sexual assault victims, but I guess there are other intentions. So that's really devious. And of course, Rachel and her new girlfriend were having sex as well, and Doug was watching, creeping outside the window. Doug was sad, so instead he focused more on work than his love life. And also, apparently, Robin Wright directed this episode, so that's pretty cool. Okay, chapter 25. It's as intense as it could ever get. Subpoenas are being issued left and right to Frank, to Raymond, to the dude who did marriage counseling for the president and his wife. And then slowly the president started to realize that Frank is behind all of it, and he started to hate Frank, which is a huge problem for Frank. This episode overall is a lot of relationships being broken and a lot of people who were Frank and Claire's victims retaliating. Things are getting dicey and risky, and the stakes are rising. And there are also a lot of trade deals in the episode, trade deals that are just so devious and evil, like Claire trading the success of passing the anti-sexual assault bill to win Jackie's trust so that Jackie could become Frank and Claire's instrument later on. Or Frank trading his trust with Garrett, the president, with his trust with Remy, or Doug giving up Rachel to get Seth and Frank's trust. The whole thing is like a very elaborate chess game full of gray areas that are barely legal, and it's really intense. Then we move on to the last episode, chapter 26, and oh boy, what a conclusive ending to a roller coaster ride of a season. In the episode, we are at a point where it's the most critical. It's either the president getting impeached or Tusk winning the battle. And at first, the situation seemed dire for Frank, as Garrett, the president, wanted to offer a pardon to Tusk and bring down Frank together. But the tables have turned when Frank used his last resort. And because of the subpoenas being issued, everyone was at stake. Plus, we have some pretty surprising scenes between Doug and Rachel, also with Gavin, the hacker dude, played by Jimmy Simpson, of course. And the ending of the episode is so devious and evil, with a cliffhanger at the end of another storyline, and I just love this ending of the episode a lot. I'm giving a spoiler alert. So at first, Garrett and Linda teamed up to get Tusk so that they can all bring down Frank together. Then Frank wrote this apology letter to Garrett, convincing him that he's helpful and loyal to him and the country. So then Garrett changed his mind and stopped working with Tusk. Meanwhile, Frank sent Seth to turn Remy in for trying to be on both Tusk and Frank's side. So that makes Tusk hate Remy, and that makes Tusk weaker. Later on, Frank pushed Tusk into a corner where Tusk had to admit that he was behind the whole money laundering scheme and that Garrett knew about it all along, so Tusk was defeated and Garrett was forced to resign. Thus, Frank became the president in the span of one season, vice president for one season, and then president for another season. So that's really crazy. And the ending where he knocks on the table twice, like that, was just so immediate, and you can tell he's more ambitious than ever. Overall, this season of House of Cards surpassed my expectations because it's just so intense and entertaining. Not only does it reflect the very dark and corrupt and messed up side of USA politics, it showed that there are evil people out there who would do anything and whatever it takes to gain power, even if it means killing, murdering. Yes, and there are so many people in this season that got fucked over, and it's really heartbreaking and painful to watch, especially for characters like Freddy, Lucas, and Christina, who really deserved some justice after what happened to Peter Russo. And meanwhile, there are even more scenes that are simply devious and sinister. Again, Kevin Spacey did a great job portraying Frank. Robin Wright was amazing too. Michael Gill is pretty great too. Gotta give him that. The performances are so convincing, it makes me doubt the mentality of the actors themselves, and people in general, in fact, especially for politicians. Maybe the way we see politics, the way we see politics through news, through the press, maybe it's just the surface. We're just, after all, the public eye, and there are so much more happening under the facade that we don't know about. And yeah, my favorite episode is chapter 26, and my least favorite, kind of a tough one, but probably 15. And I'm saying House of Cards Season 2 is mind-blowing, and I'm giving it an 8 to a 9 out of 10. So, have you watched House of Cards Season 2 from 1 to 10? How much to rate it? Like if you like it, and subscribe if you want more. And thanks for watching.